Part 205. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2042. Zhou Lejun coughed lightly and said with a smile, "It's our fault, but it's not a secret matter. It's just that our parents are worried, so our sister and brother avoided talking here." She changed her voice and asked with a smile, "When did Brother Xiang come back? Can we eat? Would you like to have some meals with us?" Xiang Mingxiu thought about it for a while and nodded, "That's fine, I just went to see your parents." Not to mention Zhou Lejun, even Zhou Liwei was stunned for a moment. The two brothers and sisters were polite. How could eldest brother Xiang, who has always been polite, suddenly be so rude? Zhou Liwei scratched his head and couldn't help but look at Zhou Lejun. What should they do? They've all eaten. Zhou Lejun was just stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Please, big brother, just as my fourth uncle is here, do you want some wine?" Xiang Mingxiu nodded with a smile. When they got to the main hall, old Zhutu and the others were talking to Mrs. Lu and Mr. Zhuang, while Zhou Dalin and his brothers were standing in a pile, and they didn't know what they were talking about. When Thursday Lang looked up and saw Xiang Mingxiu, his eyes lit up immediately. He left his brothers and went up to meet him, laughed and patted his shoulder and said, "Brother Xiang, as soon as I came back, I heard that you went to Fengzhou. I thought it will take several days to see you, but I didn't expect you to be back now." Xiang Mingxiu smiled and said, "I came back early this morning and arranged for the talents of my subordinates to come. I didn't expect it to be such a coincidence that you are also coming to Beijing at this time." On Thursday, Lang asked, "Have you talked to Fengzhou?" Xiang Mingxiu smiled and nodded, "Yes, so the time to enter the grasslands this year will be delayed, at least until the summer harvest is over before entering." Xiang Mingxiu did not intend to compete with Shiro Lang for the tea business. The goods they brought in from the grassland included medicinal materials, furs, pearls, and gems, etc. Because they each had their own sales channels, there was no conflict at present. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Originally, Xiang Mingxiu also had a tea business, but it was not big, but his hometown was also in Jianese Road, so it was not difficult to find tea. But after thinking about it, he still gave up this business and left it all to Zhou Lang. He went to Fengzhou to find food, and planned to do the food business when he entered the grassland, and he could bring some porcelain and fabrics. Make a lot of money. Thursday Lang naturally knew that this was Xiang Mingxiu's good intentions. He was a little anxious, but also moved. After a while, he wanted to take Xiang Mingxiu to discuss this matter carefully, but he finally opened his mouth to Xiang Ming. Shui looked over there. Oh, that's my second brother and second sister-in-law." Shiro remembered that he hadn't met his second brother and second sister-in-law yet. Xiang Mingxiu lived in Zhou's house, although he lived on the other side, he didn't even go out. He walked towards the east side of the door, but he always met under the same roof, so he pulled Xiang Mingxiu to meet the couple first. "Second brother, this is what I told you about Brother Xiang. Brother Xiang, this is my second brother and second sister-in-law." On Tuesday, Lang raised a smile and was about to say hello, while Xiang Mingxiu was silent for a while and then called out, "Uncle Tuesday, Aunt Tuesday." Zhou Lang's smile froze slightly, and he couldn't help looking at Shiro. What's going on? How could he be better than the fourth generation? Shiro also froze, turning his head to look at Mingxiu. There was a suspicious red on Xiang Mingxiu's face. Although it was not obvious, Shiro could still see the embarrassment of his good brother. Why be embarrassed? Zhou Shilang's head turned slowly. It was obvious that several of their brothers were called brothers, even the older Zhou Dalin and Xiang Mingxiu were called Zhou Daja. How could it be the second brother's turn to be called uncle? A firework exploded in Chu Yulang's mind, and he suddenly thought of the troubles that the second sister-in-law had been talking about just now, saying that Lejun was so old, but he still hadn't said his kiss. Friday Lang and Saturday Lang also fell silent, looking at Xiang Mingxiu silently. Zhou Liwei turned his head stiffly to look at his sister. Zhou Lijun looked at him inexplicably, and it took a long time to realize what he meant, and what Xiang Mingxiu meant. Zhou Lijun was surprised for a while, and couldn't help but look up at Xiang Mingxiu. Zhou Dalin rolled up his sleeves and walked over from the other side. Seeing that they were standing together without hearing a voice, he asked, "What are you talking about? Master Xiang is back. Have you eaten? Do you want to have some food?" Xiang Mingxiu took a deep breath quietly, trying to keep himself from seeing much change. "I've already eaten, thank you, brother. It's getting late, I'll go back to the house to rest first. I came here thinking I haven't seen Uncle Tuesday, so I came over to say hello." So he saluted Mingxiu and left. Zhou Dalin looked inexplicable, turned his head and asked Thursday Lang, "Who is Uncle Tuesday?" "Our uncle." Thursday Lang just stared at Thursday Lang with a face full of words. On Tuesday, Lang was not stupid. At first, he thought it was Xiang Mingxiu who called him wrong, but he called his eldest brother on purpose. Obviously, it was not intentional, but intentional. But I don't know if it's wrong or right. On Tuesday, Lang looked at Zhou Lijun, and the father and daughter looked at each other silently. In the end, Lang was too embarrassed to ask his daughter about these things. This kind of thing should still be asked by the mother. But he knew that his wife and daughter actually had some contradictions, especially now that the daughter is getting more and more powerful and her temper is even tougher. It's good if the two get together, not to mention whether they can ask anything, and if they don't quarrel. So he looked at Shiro, and simply stretched out his hand and dragged him away. Mrs. Feng wanted to ask Zhou Lijun to ask, but on Thursday, Lang felt bad, so he immediately pulled his hand and pulled Mrs. Feng up. "Second sister-in-law, let's talk together." Feng entered the door early. At that time, Langdu was still a little boy, so she unceremoniously reached out and patted his paw, but she didn't object, and immediately followed their brothers away. She also wanted to know more. What is the problem? However, Zhou Lijun's heart was broken. She made a mistake, it was too bad. She wanted to bring trouble to the east, but why did she usher in trouble on her head? She looked at Zhou Liwei suspiciously. "It's you." "No," Zhou Liwei said without thinking about it. "Second sister, this is about your famous festival." "Am I the kind of person who would make fun of sister's famous festivals?" Only then did Zhou Lijun think about another possibility. "So." Zhou Liwei lowered his voice and said, "So Big Brother Xiang likes you, no wonder he specially asked us to call him Big Brother Xiang, and he said something different." Shi Zulang was also explaining to Zhou Yilang and Feng Shi, "People on the grassland are not strict about the details, and our two families are either relatives or friends, and they are just some kind of favors," so he and Liz Hong and the others on the grassland talked to each other. He didn't want to be called old for nothing, so they asked him to call him Big Brother Xiang. "Then I do business with him, of course, it's different, that's why it's called like that." What a mess. Then why did he call the eldest brother, but it was my turn to call the second uncle? He can tell who is calling after whom. Zhou Lang stared at Thursday and asked, "Tell me honestly, is it Lijun? What's with him?" See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2043. "No," Shu Lang interrupted him directly and said, "Second brother, Lijun, she doesn't want to get married at all, okay? Do you know how much money she can earn a year?" "Well, I don't know either." "But you know I don't know, the family's accounts and money are in her hands." The workers in Pu village, the younger sister, said that the eldest brother was in charge, but the accounts were still in her hands. All the rented children will be in her hands. She is living well at home now. She can make money if she wants to, and she can be decent if she wants to be decent. She is either uncle or uncle at home, and she doesn't need her to serve her. Instead, She can eat as soon as she gets home. What is her wedding plan? Zhou Hulang said with a look of disgust, and Xiang Mingxiu is better at reading, smarter, has more family, has a good reputation, and has a little family property. He is several years older than Li Jun. That's it, how could Li Jun like him? Tuesday Lang, are you demeaning him or praising him? He turned to look at his wife, and sure enough, seeing her eyes sparkling, Feng asked, is this young Master Xiang good at studying? Thursday Lang nodded solemnly. Before the accident in his family, he was a student of a government school. Do you think he's serious? Originally, he was going to come to the capital to take an examination of the Imperial College. Isn't that the same as Mr. Bai? In Feng Shi's opinion, there is no man in this world more promising and excellent than Bai Shan, and her aunt can match. And now, someone similar to Bai Shan has taken a fancy to her daughter. Feng Shi immediately asked, who else is there in this young Master Xiang's family? I seem to have heard from you before that he is also from Argianese Road. Thursday Lang nodded, his house is not very far from our house, there is no one in the family, there are only a few clan brothers and an elder, but they are not close. On Tuesday Lang couldn't help pulling Feng Shi. Feng Shi patted his hand and continued to ask, how much land does his family have? Thursday Lang said, it's bigger than ours. Many of his former shops and mansions can't be taken back, but the court has recovered quite a few from the king of Yizhu. I heard him say that those shops and everything that can be sold in the house has been sold, and everything that cannot be sold is now rented out, and a little rent is charged every month. On the land, everything that is still under the name of the king of Yizhu has basically been returned, especially Dongzi village. A parcel of land basically counts as his. Even Tuesday Lang was speechless. So rich, what does he really mean? Hearing what he said so well, Feng Shi hesitated, isn't there anything wrong with him? Although the conditions are really good, it is not okay if people have faults. Thursday Lang, second sister-in-law, he was just delayed by revenge, what's wrong? This revenge has been avenged for 2 or 3 years. Why haven't you talked about your relatives? Thursday Lang thought for a while and said, his personality is not the same as others, and he can't trust people anymore, so he never said kiss. Feng Shi was even more alert, that's even worse. If he doesn't trust the person next to him, what's the point of marrying him? Although she was very attracted to Xiang Mingxiu's money and smart head, she also thought that area would be able to help her family and her husband after she got married. But if he doesn't believe in people, then it's boring for the couple to live together. They can't even believe in them. How boring is the life? Second sister-in-law, if he doesn't believe in Li Jun, he will definitely not mention this. Before we entered the grassland together, we have always had discussions. Feng Shi was excited again, but Tuesday Lang had to be more cautious and said, why don't you wait for the little girl to come out and ask her? He said, isn't it because he was seriously injured before, and even his hamstring was broken? We also have to ask how the person's health is, in case it's not good. He couldn't let his daughter go early. Of being a widow, isn't it? When Feng thought about it, he was in no hurry. Yes, ask my aunt. Thursday Lang's mind that had been surging just now calmed down. He nodded and said, all right, then I'll talk to him later. The main thing is to ask clearly if he really meant it. Zhou Lizhong also appeared out of nowhere, and looked around Zhou Lijun with his brothers and sisters. Second sister, did you mean that to young Master Xiang? Zhou Lijun was upset, how do I know? She has always regarded people as heroes, friends, and partners. Who knows what people think in that direction? And it's just a hint, but it doesn't say it explicitly. What does this make her say? Feng Shi rushed over from the other side, pulled Zhou Lijun and was about to go back to the house to speak. Zhou Lijun sighed in his heart, feeling that he was really unlucky. He originally wanted to take advantage of Zhou Liwei's marriage to avoid this year, but who knew that she was blocked in the front? Zhou Lejun let his mother pull him into the room, and sat obediently at the table to watch her close the door. Feng Shi asked with concern, ya, honestly, when we asked you in the afternoon, your face turned red, do you also like that young master Xiang? It was a mistake, Zhou Lejun weighed it in his heart, and felt that admitting at this time would not benefit him much, and maybe it was a sure thing to do, not to mention whether Xiang Mingxiu meant that, really, she was not happy to be so confused is said. So he shook his head, Mother, I have always been a hero to eldest brother Xiang, never thought of marrying him. Why? Feng asked, your fourth uncle said that he is good at studying and has a lot of farms in his family. Except for being a little older, he has no other problems. I heard that he was admitted to the government school at a very young age. Just like your little uncle. It's a long way off, okay, Zhou Lejun said without thinking, eldest brother Xiang is smart, and he values love and righteousness, but he still lags behind my little uncle in school. My little uncle is going to take the Jinshi exam now at the age of 16. I only went to the government school back then. He added, just listen to what the fourth uncle said, don't take it seriously, the court gave him some shops and mansions, but those shops are not very good, or they were vacated by force, let alone not sell them. Even renting is not easy to rent, and now most of them are closed, or open for his people to do some small business. Those who followed Xiang Mingxiu back then began to disband after the death of King Yizhu. Some gave money to send home, some gave fields and shops to settle down, and the rest are now following him around for business. At that time, he didn't have much money on him. The money for severance was the house and some shops that he sold. Most of the unsellable ones were given to the relatives and subordinates who wanted to live in peace. A lot of the land he recovered was also divided among people. But he does have a lot of land, and they are all good ones, Zhou Lejun said. Back then, his family's land was good, and the king of Yizhu always kept it himself after he got it, so after the king of Yizhu was raided, the land was returned to him, and the land of his relatives was also given to him. Therefore, there is not much to learn from Xiangming, but there is indeed a lot of land. So, Zhou Lejun was a little moved. She even took a fancy to other people's wealth, and she became irritable just thinking about it. Feng Shi looked her up and down suspiciously and asked, how do you know so well? See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2044. Zhou Lejun said as a matter of course, he said it. She said, not only do I know about this, but also the elder brother, the second brother and the fourth uncle. From the capital to the grasslands, there are so many places to go through along the way. It is necessary to buy goods and continue to deliver goods. They have to stay together every day, especially after entering the grasslands, in order to guard against the caravan, everyone sleeps together. She is a girl's family and can have a tent alone, but is surrounded by the tents of several of them. At night, when everyone is around the bonfire, can't gossip. There are so many serious things, it won't take long to talk about it. So over time, not only their uncles and nephews knew the details of the Xiang family, but also Xiang Mingxiu knew the details of their old Zhou family. What's more, the biggest secrets of the two companies are still overlapping, and they have all been solved publicly. What else can't be said between the two? When Feng Shi heard this, he thought about it, that is to know the bottom line. When Zhou Lejun heard it, he was afraid that her mother had made a decision for her directly, so she quickly said, Mother, you have to ask the little girl about such a big thing, right? She is still in charge of her sister-in-law's work field and the family's accounts. To be honest, if it weren't for the world, she really didn't want to get married, mainly because she was living well now. it's a pity that if she really doesn't marry for the rest of her life, she may not be able to do business in the future, especially if she needs to contact the business of some female relatives. Thursday Lang hurried to find Xiang Mingxiu. Xiang Mingxiu had already ordered some food and drinks from the kitchen in advance, and when he saw him coming, he stretched out his hand and said, "Sit down." Thursday Lang silently stepped forward and sat down, staring at him. Xiang Mingxiu held the pot and poured him a glass of wine, and without waiting for him to ask, he admitted generously, "I want to marry a monarch." Thursday Lang, "I treat you as a brother, but you want to be my niece-in-law." "But..." Thursday Lang took a serious look at Xiang Mingxiu. To be honest, he went in and out of the grassland with him twice. He still personally agreed with this marriage, otherwise he would not have praised the second brother and the second sister-in-law. Learn from Ming. However, he couldn't cheat his niece either, so he drank the wine in the glass, put down the glass and asked, "Do you like my niece?" Xiang Mingxiu nodded without shyness. After a while, he explained, "Actually, I used to really be Li Jun's niece. After all, from Imperial Dr. Zhou, I am indeed a generation older than her." He was not impure in the first place. Because of Zhou Man's relationship, Xiang Mingxiu has always been commensurate with Zhou Lejun and his peers, but they entered the grassland together last year to show their closeness. Zhou Lejun asked his nephew to call him uncle, and he felt awkward when Zhou Lejun also called him. He has met many people, but there is only one Zhou Man as a capable girl like Zhou Lejun. But Zhou Lejun's ability is not the same as Zhou Man. Zhou Man is just like them. She was raised as a scholar, so she is smart and capable, but she can always make people ignore her gender and intersect as a kindred. Zhou Lejun is not. He can see the tenacity of women from her. She has all the constraints and prejudices that women are subject to at the moment, and he can feel it, and she is also working hard to break free from these constraints. Zhou Man is different. She sees too much and is too casual. She never takes these to heart, so she will not suffer from this, but how many people in this world can do this? I'm afraid it's just her. And there are so few women like Zhou Lejun. Xiang Mingxiu felt pity at first, thinking that this little girl is smart, tough, and willing to endure hardship, and is stronger than most men in this world. Later, we entered the grassland together for more than 2 months, looked up and saw it, and I didn't know when I started to watch more. In fact, Xiang Mingxiu hesitated, mainly because it was not easy to mention. As Chu Youlang said, he is several years older than her, and he is also different in seniority from her. Even if the two of them are not relatives, but the friendship with Zhou Man is the first, the two of them are not very suitable. But when he heard what she and Zhou Liwei said today, he couldn't help but take action. On the way back, he thought about it, if she is willing to marry me, I will make her feel comfortable in the future, and I will not restrain her from being trapped in the back house. Of course, Thursday Lang also knew about his second niece's ambition and ability. In a serious way, Zhou Lejun's ability to do business was no weaker than his. When I went with her last year, the family made 3 times as much money as the year before, a large part of it. The reason is that she buys and sells goods along the way, constantly buying and selling to earn. He stared at Xiang Mingxiu and asked, "Are you serious? After getting married, are you still willing to let her go out to do business or even go to the grassland with us?" Xiang Mingxiu nodded, "As long as she wants to go." When Thursday Lang heard it, he touched his chin and thought for a while, then asked, "Then do you mind if she still helps her parents' family with the business after she gets married?" Xiang Mingxiu. He stared at Zhou Lang, and the two looked at each other for a long time, and finally said to Ming Shui, "Brother Thursday, are you not afraid that she will take all her parents' money to her husband's house?" Thursday Lang waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about this, you will definitely have to sign a contract at that time, and there is also her share here, and there are accounts. Besides, she is not such a person." The last sentence seems like a temporary addition. Xiang Mingxiu thought for a while and said, this depends on her own will. Thursday Lang got excited, patted his shoulder with his hand across a table, and said with relief, good brother, it's not worth my compliment in front of the second brother and the second sister-in-law. He said happily, if our two families are really married, we can do business together. At that time, we might even be able to open a trade route on the grassland. Many big companies entering the grasslands have their own fixed cooperative tribes, and each time they agree on a transaction time, this is their own business route. Xiang Mingxiu shook his head and chuckled, I'm afraid not. He said, I can't take the imperial examinations, but my son can, so I don't want to make the business too big. I should consider giving some benefits to my subordinates in order to offset my wages when my brother's 2 trips on Thursday. If the court finds out like this, it would be because so many of you are just running some errands together, plus you have a lot of land, so it shouldn't change your household registration. Thursday Lang, the imperial court did not restrict merchants from taking imperial examinations. Xiang Mingxiu himself had been admitted to the academy at the beginning, and he went to the examiner. Naturally, he knew that he said, although there are no restrictions, there are still some differences. The children of poor families, nobles, and noble families are different when they go to work. Not to mention the sons of merchants, there are very few officials who have come out of business registration who can reach the 3rd rank, and not many of the 5th rank. Basically, it is insulated from the position of the prime minister. Therefore, Xiang Mingxiu will not allow his descendants to be discriminated against like this. Thursday Lang was still ignorant, but Zhou Lejun outside the door was stunned. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2045. She made an excuse to send her mother away, and wanted to come and ask Xiang Mingxiu in person what she meant. It was not her style to sit still, so it was better to make this kind of thing clear face to face. But I didn't expect to hear this. Zhou Lejun became thoughtful. Xiang Mingxiu, who was in the room, raised his head and looked out the door, but Shiro turned his head to look back. He didn't see anything outside the door, and asked, what's wrong? When Xiang Mingxiu heard the person behind the door and wall turned around and seemed to leave, he shook his head and said, it's nothing. When Thursday Lang left Xiang Mingxiu and hummed a song to go back to his house, he passed the central hall and saw a shadowy person standing by the corridor in the dark night. After drinking a lot of wine, the confused Thursday Lang's feet softened. Seeing that the figure seemed to turn towards him and walk towards him, he immediately shouted, well, then, what, don't come here. The figure paused for a while, and Thursday Lang Ju's beating heart was a little better, and he immediately shouted, the injustice has a debt and the owner, our family is a new move-in, if you want revenge, go find the previous owner. 4th uncle, the figure took a step forward, pinching his waist and said, what are you making a fuss about? The cold sweat on Chu Yulang's back was chilled by the night wind. He took 2 steps forward and rubbed his eyes. Only then did he see the person standing by the wall. He exhaled and said angrily, you stand, why don't you light lanterns here? Don't you know that people are scary and will die? Zhou Lejun, Grandpa and Grandma don't light the lights, saying it costs money. Didn't you see that none of the lanterns in our house were lit tonight? Thursalang looked up, and it was true. In the past, the lanterns had to be lit, and they would be extinguished when everyone went back to their respective rooms. Zhou Lejun said, and what's so scary about this? We used to walk through the village in the middle of the night, and we didn't see you scared when we passed the grave. What do you know, there were a lot of people back then, and most of them were men, so of course you shouldn't be afraid of yang energy, said Thursday. Don't you all say that there will be a lot of people dying in this kind of big house? That resentment can't be determined. How deep? Zhou Lejun couldn't help but glared at him, but it was dark at night, and Chu Yulang might not have seen it, so she could only say, 4th uncle, you shouldn't say such things in front of your family in the future. It belongs to the crown prince, what will outsiders think if it is spread out? Thursday Lang responded, didn't I be frightened by you? Do you think I've said this before? He was frightened by drinking and felt a little dizzy at the moment, so he turned his head and said, I remember there was a big rock nearby. Zhou Lejun pointed him to the location, so the two uncles and nephews sat on the big stone. Thursday Lang exhaled, feeling much better, and asked, tell me, what are you looking for from me? Zhou Lejun asked, what does young Master Xiang mean? Don't call me brother anymore. Shiro didn't hide it, and told her what Xiang Mingxiu said tonight. He was still very optimistic about this marriage, and said, I know your temper, if you marry back to the village, it will be too wronged. Now, you went to school yourself, you can read, you know how to settle accounts, and you have no shortage of ways to make money. Who in the village is worthy of you? But if you marry in the city, someone whose family background and abilities are worthy of you will probably not want to let you get involved in the outside business, he said. Young people of the same age as you have parents at home who are in their prime. I'm sure I can do it for another 20 to 30 years, not to mention you, even someone's own son may not be able to do things outside the master, and there are a few more brothers in the family, for money, I don't know how many bad things. Thursday Lang said, you must be more aware of this kind of thing than I do when you often go to the back of the house. Zhou Lejun was silent, which was why she had been reluctant to talk about her relatives. She is my sister-in-law's niece, and she has a good reputation. In fact, in the past 2 years, many people have inquired about her with her family. Even a few imperial physicians in the imperial hospital talked to my aunt, but she never let go, because of this. After getting married, she basically serves her in-laws and husband, and has nothing to do. It sounded much easier than farming in the village, and it seemed lighter than now, but she just didn't like it. She finds it a pleasure to use her own money to make more money. Thursday Lang said, there are not many husbands in the world who are willing to let you be as free as you are now. Xiang Ming is not only willing to learn from him, but we also know the bottom line, and the character and appearance are not bad, so I feel good. Zhou Lejun thought about it seriously and said, I have to think about it. Think about it. Shu Yulang got up from the stone and supported his waist. Anyway, you don't want to respond immediately. When Man Bao leaves the palace, you can just ask her what she means. By the way, she will leave the palace the day after tomorrow, right? Zhou Lejun responded with a yes. Man Bao left the palace early in the morning. As long as the old Zhou family did not go out to work, they would all wait in the front yard. Zhou Lang and Feng Shi had not seen her for a long time, so they happily greeted her as soon as they met. They thought about mentioning Zhou Lejun for a while, but after Man Bao greeted them, he turned his head and stared at Zhou Lejun. Fourth brother, are you ill? Thursday Lang looked inexplicable, no. Everyone turned their heads and saw that there was nothing wrong except that he felt a little unmotivated. Zhou Dalin said, did you go out to drink again last night? No, said Thursday Lang, I don't like drinking very much. I was at home last night. Man Bao stepped forward and touched his forehead, frowned and said, it's just sick. Fang Shi immediately reached out and touched it, and said in surprise, why is it so hot, don't you feel it at all? Shiro touched his forehead, it seemed to be a little hot, but he didn't feel it was hot. He said, I don't feel any discomfort at all. Man Bao had already touched his pulse, and his brows couldn't help but wrinkle tightly. Bai Shan stepped forward to look at his face and asked, doesn't your throat hurt? That's because I was drinking before. Man Bao glared at him and said, it's not just drinking, but you've also caught a cold. I'll give you a needle and prescribe medicine. So Thursday Lang was filled with medicine before he could say anything, but he didn't feel too uncomfortable. At noon, at the gesture of his second brother and second sister-in-law, he discussed with Man Bao about Xiang Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun. Man Bao was surprised. Brother Xiang likes Lejun? Does Lejun like him? Thursday Lang said, yesterday she told me she felt good. Man Bao looked suspicious. Really? Of course it's true. Yesterday, Xiang Mingxiu went to talk to her. After we separated, she told me that Xiangjia was good. If you don't believe me, ask her. Man Bao turned around and went to ask Zhou Lejun. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2046. Zhou Lejun said, he is very sincere, and then I think he is very good, not only in appearance but also in learning. Little aunt, he said that our family has to divide some of the business out to the third brother and the others. It is not necessary to be listed as a commercial registration. Man Bao nodded, yes, I was just about to tell you, it will start when you leave the grassland this time. What's wrong? I think he is very knowledgeable, Zhou Lejun said seriously, he is so smart and powerful. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that I am a high-ranking person to marry into his family. Man Bao smiled and said, it's not Gao Pan, he is the only one in his family, and there are many people in our family. Man Bao thought of a crucial question, will he also call me auntie in the future? Zhou Lejun blushed rarely, little aunt, the 8 characters haven't been written yet. Man Bao waved his hand and said, he has a heart, you are willing, what else can't be done? There is no problem with the family background of the 2 families. Most of Xiang Mingxiu's current business overlaps with that of the Zhou family, so as long as the 2 are willing, the Zhou family will not object. And there are no other elders in the Xiang family, and Xiang Mingxiu can call the shots himself. Sure enough, in the afternoon, Feng Shi found a space to ask Man Bao Xiang Mingxiu's physical condition. I heard that he was captured by the king of Yizhu and suffered serious injuries. Man Bao smiled and said, although there are some dark wounds left, it will be uncomfortable when it is windy, rainy and humid, but as long as you pay attention to conditioning and longevity, it will be fine. He added, on the other hand, he can't do too strenuous exercise on his feet, such as horse riding, running, and walking for a long time. Feng Shi was relieved, I see that he only travels by car now, and their family doesn't seem to be short of money, so don't worry about that. Feng Shi still couldn't help but ask, what do you think of this marriage? After thinking about it, Man Bao said, as long as Lejun likes it, it's still very good. Apart from not being able to go to office, there are no other shortcomings in the family, except that there are no elders and brothers in the family. The Zhou family has a harmonious atmosphere, and the Qian family and the old Zhou head are on top, so the benefits of having more brothers have always been reflected. Man Bao naturally thinks that having more brothers and sisters is a benefit. But Feng knew that for a married daughter-in-law, having more siblings meant more trouble. Even in the old Zhou family, the concubines were not without opinions at all. Whoever washes the dishes has more bowls, and even whoever uses more oil and less oil when cooking can't help but mutter a few words in his heart. So she thinks it's good that Xiang Mingxiu doesn't have siblings. She only needs to have a good relationship with Xiang Mingxiu when she enters the house. It's just that it's not good to have no elders. If the 2 children quarrel in the future, I'm afraid no one will persuade them. Moreover, the 2 are still young, and many things need the guidance of the elders. Without elders, life will be less smooth. But in the future, she and her child's father will worry more about it. It was with such a plan that when Xiang Mingxiu formally invited a matchmaker to come forward to speak, Zhou Lang did not respond directly, but he was relieved. So Xiang Mingxiu decided to invite a matchmaker to come over in 2 days. However, Thursday Lang didn't have the energy to ask about it because he was seriously ill. After taking the medicine for 1 day, not only did it not improve, but it got worse the next day. Man Bao touched his pulse and said, you have been overworked this year, and you have been restless during this period of time, and this illness is all over the place. Come out, take it slow. Man Bao gave him a needle, then gave him a new prescription, frowned and said, I'm going to the palace tomorrow morning, this is 3 days medicine, after 3 days you can go to Ji Shitang and ask Dr. Ding to give it. You prescribe a new prescription, and if you don't feel better in the past 2 days, go to Ji Shitang to see the doctor, don't delay. The fever subsided in the evening on Thursday, and the dry itching in the throat was no longer so uncomfortable. Seeing this, Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief, peeled off the ointment on his neck, wiped it clean, and said, I'll put a new ointment on you after using the evening meal. Thursday Lang touched his neck and said, I think it's better to apply ointment than to take medicine, so I'll just stick the ointment and forget it. Man Baidao, it's not the same, the ointment is to eliminate the lesions in your throat, so that you don't have a fever again. The medicine you take is not only to treat your cold, but also to regulate your body. The skin is abnormal, so the loss is a bit serious. If you don't want to suffer from minor diseases and serious diseases, you should take medicine. Mr. Fang, who was on the side, heard it, and without waiting for Thursday to speak, he said, Don't worry, little ant, I must keep an eye on him, he doesn't dare not take medicine. Chu Yulang silently closed his mouth, looking like he was unlovable. Then can you stop prescribing such a bitter medicine? Did you prescribe a lot of Huanglian for me? Nonsense, why would I prescribe Huanglian for you if you have a cold? Man Bao said righteously, among the 3 prescriptions, this is already the least bitter medicine. You haven't drunk, how do you know? What I smelled, the more bitter the medicine, the stronger the smell. Man Bao said, you haven't offended me recently, why did I prescribe bitter medicine for you? Thinking about it on Thursday, Lang felt a little better. After applying the ointment, Thursday night did not have a fever anymore, but his nose was still uncomfortable and his head was a little dizzy. He thought it would be fine in 2 or 3 days. He still didn't get it right. He could only go to Ji Shitang to find Dr. Ding, and by the way, he brought the prescription prescribed by Man Bao and the pulse case he had written. Dr. Ding read the pulse chart and the prescription, listened to his pulse carefully, and asked him the details of his illness during this period of time. After deliberating for a while, he re-prescribed a prescription for him, but changed Zhou Man's prescription. Just a few matches above. He handed the prescription to Thursday Lang and said, the lesions on your throat are almost gone, but you are not feeling well, and it will easily recur in the future, so it is better to take the medicine at this time to completely remove the lesions, and I will have someone call out a post the medicine sticker for you. Thuro touched his throat, and he no longer felt itchy and uncomfortable. Although it shouldn't be, he still couldn't hold back the question, do I still need to take medicine? He said, I have been taking the medicine for 5 days, and I have put on the medicine patch for 3 days. Dr. Ding raised his head and glanced at Shishu Lang. If another patient asked this question, he would surely comfort him with a gentle voice, saying that he would be fine to take the medicine for a few more days. After all, he had to make the patient believe in himself. But this is Zhou Man's own brother, so Dr. Ding went into more detail. He took the pulse sheet brought by Shishu Lang and said, wind cold is one of the most intractable common diseases in the world, and many people will get it. Wind cold, there will be many times in one's life, it doesn't seem to be a big disease, but some wind cold can kill people. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2047. When the evil wind enters the body and the cold is attacked, if it happens to be the worst time, it will be very difficult to save it. Look at the pulse of the Lord Thursday, your illness is very bad at the beginning. To be honest, Zhou Xiao, I'm still surprised that the doctor can let you walk to Ji Shitang to see a doctor by yourself in 5 days. Dr. Ding said, if I treat it myself, your disease will definitely recur. If you follow the doctor's advice carefully, you may be cured within 3 months. Thursday Lang heard the subtext, and it may not be cured. He was stunned for a moment and asked, so serious? Dr. Ding said with a smile, Thursday Master's body has been conditioned now, but he can still see the emptiness inside. I'm afraid that he has been exhausted and tired over the past year. Thursday Lang pondered, my little sister's medical skills are so good now. Dr. Ding, Dr. Zhou Xiao is an imperial physician now, so he is naturally powerful. Having said that, Dr. Ding was surprised too, he didn't expect Zhou Man to be so powerful now. After Thursday Lang left, he silenced his pulse case and the prescription, acupuncture and medicine stickers that Zhou Man gave him, and then stared in a daze. Dr. Tao also looked at the patient in his hand, and came over to talk to him. Seeing that he was looking at the paper on the case seriously, he asked, why, have you encountered a difficult disease? Dr. Ding handed him both the pulse plan and the prescription. No name was written on the pulse case, and Dr. Ding didn't know who it was, but after reading the pulse case, he looked at the recipe and couldn't help but praise, awesome, who gave this recipe? Dr. Ding said, Zhou Man. Dr. Tao looked at the acupuncture and the medicinal patch, and said with a smile, no wonder, there are not many doctors who can use acupuncture, medicinal patch and decoction to treat diseases at the same time. Dr. Ding nodded, stroked his beard and said, but the effect is also very good. This patient's fever subsided in only 5 days, and most of the disease has recovered. A pulse like this should be a malignant wind chill. It is estimated that the cold wind blows and the skin is disordered, inhale the evil sweat into the body, and the evil wind takes the opportunity to enter the lesions caused by the body. Dr. Tao focused on children's diseases, knowing that such diseases are the most difficult to treat, and sighed, such a disease of wind and cold is not easy to treat, and if one is not good, it will smash the brand. Dr. Ding nodded, wait for Dr. Zhou Xiao to rest next time, shall we go to her to have a meal together? All the patients admitted to Zhou Menyi's clinic were cured and left, and now she rarely wanders here again. Dr. Tao rolled his eyes and said, call the big shopkeeper. Dr. Ding couldn't help but smile, thinking it was a good idea. The shopkeeper was in trouble, and when he took a rest again, he stared at his son who had come to the pharmacy. Zhenggu couldn't stand his gaze, so he could only put down the medicine pestle in his hand, raised his head and asked, Dad, just say what you want to say. Why are you staring at him all the time? Is he scared? The shopkeeper Zhengde said quietly, next month, your junior sister will get married. Zhenggu naturally knew that he and Zheng Xiao Zhou were discussing what gifts to give. The shopkeeper Zheng continued quietly, I heard Liu say that her second sister has also been engaged, and even the wedding date has been set, which is in the 12th lunar month of this year. This Zhenggu also knew that Zhou Liru was his junior sister after all. Although he was only studying in the Imperial Physician office for half a day, there was still some communication between the senior brothers and sisters. He looked at his father, not quite understanding what he meant. Shopkeeper Zhengde hated that iron could not become steel. How old are you? Can you find a daughter-in-law for your father? Zhenggu, father, you only told me a few years ago that I am now in the Imperial Hospital, maybe I can become an Imperial physician in 2 years, so let me not rush into marriage. Shopkeeper Zhengde, I said the words, but if you don't want to, you can tell me. Zhenggu, I will. The shopkeeper Zhengde was even more unhappy. He was struggling now. He felt that after 2 more years, his son should be able to talk about a better marriage. But wait another 2 years, he is getting older, if he says kiss now, he will be able to hold his grandson in 2 years. Zhenggu ignored his father's entanglement and continued to lower his head and pestle the medicine. The 3 of Lu Sunyang, who were hiding not far away to sort out the herbs, breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Liru whispered, senior brother is really pitiful, it seems that nothing is right. Zheng Xiao didn't speak, but Lu Sunyang smiled and said, this is called luck, we haven't wanted this luck yet. Among the 4 brothers and sisters, Zheng Gu is the only one whose parents are so concerned about marriage and career. Zhou Liru thought of something, and happily said to Lu Sunyang, senior sister, you married my eldest brother, will I call you sister-in-law or sister-in-law in the future? Lu Sunyang blushed slightly and said, of course it's senior sister. Lu Sunyang's wedding date is set for June 28th. Old Zhou has a lot of family members, so she doesn't need to worry about the little girl Man Bao. It's just that that day is not a holiday, so she asked for leave 2 days earlier. Thursalang's illness was completely gone by now, and he was busy with his ruddy face. This was the second happy event after the old Zhou family moved into the Zhou residence, and it was also the biggest one. After all, the eldest grandson got married, and most of the family was here. When it was auspicious, Zhou Lizhong took a group of brothers to Liu's house to welcome their relatives. Bai Erlang and Bai Shan followed. Man Bao also wanted to go, but was held back by Jian. She said, you are an elder, and you are a colleague with Imperial Physician Lu. It is not appropriate to go there. It is not easy to entertain you at the Lu family, so just wait at home. Man Bao could only watch Bai Shan and Bai Erlang walk out with Zhou Lizhong around, watching them happily run away on their horses. She is infinitely sorry. Dr. Lu is now the acting director of the Imperial Hospital, and Zhou Man is a popular person in front of the Empress and the Crown Prince. His medical skills are also well known in the Imperial Hospital, so the two married, and the doctor who came to Hexi the most was the doctor. The Imperial doctor in the Imperial Hospital, as well as the doctors outside, and even the merchants of medicinal materials, first went to the Lu family to see the Lu family's married daughter, and then simply drank a glass of wedding wine, and then went to the general. The bride welcomes the returning Zhou family. Then it was lively at Zhou's house. The crown prince didn't know about Zhou Man's nephew getting a wife, but the crown prince knew. Because she was on leave, it was another imperial doctor who arranged to give the little emperor's grandson the pulse of peace today. Because she knew, the crown princess also had someone give the Zhou family a gift, which was not very precious, but more than honor. And the crown princess gave it all, and naturally the Su family, the crown princess's family, also gave it, not to mention the Yin family, Lu family, Feng family, Yi family, etc. all gave gifts. When the other families saw it, they simply picked some from the warehouse. The gift came, but no one came. Zhou Lejun wrote down the gift list, and these gifts will be returned in the future. Xiang Mingxiu followed his busy schedule, and seeing that although she remembered it in detail, it was not very good looking, so he taught her how to make the accounts more clear at a glance. After Thursday Lang greeted the last wave of guests, he turned to the concierge and saw Xiang Mingxiu leaning over halfway and talking to Zhou Lejun. I saved the manuscript for one chapter. The master will fly home this afternoon, so the next chapter will be available at 11 o'clock in the evening. She said that it is too late, so don't rush to see my sister, and I will read it tomorrow. Bar. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2048. He immediately coughed lightly, and stepped forward to pull him and said, Mingxiu, there are several shopkeepers in front of me. You can come with me. Xiang Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun are already engaged, so naturally they can't talk about each other anymore, so now Xiang Mingxiu has to call 4 uncles to Shiro. Although he was always able to stop calling him, Shi Zuolang adapted well. After the two officially got married, he changed his title from Xiangxiang to Mingxiu, which was very smooth. On Thursday, Lang dragged Xiang Mingxiu to the front to entertain the guests, preventing him from getting along too closely with Zhou Lejun. But this is impossible, because they have already decided to go to the grassland after the wedding. The summer harvest is over, Xiang Mingxue bought a lot of grain and porcelain from Fengzhou and other places, plus some cloth. He brought a lot of things this time. On the other hand, Zhou Lejun prepared a lot of tea bricks, and porcelain cloth, and the goods were also quite large, more than last year, so Zhou Lejun still followed them into the grassland this year. Zhou Lishong had just gotten married, and Zhou Lejun had handed over the accounts of the work field in Pu village to him, and the data of the experimental field had to be recorded by him, so he did not go to the grasslands this year, but Zhou Liwei followed. Because of this, Zhou Lejun and Feng Shi, who wanted to set him up for a marriage, were anxious, but Zhou Lejun, who wanted to bring trouble to the east, was not in a hurry, and said to his parents, "Brother, he has a sweetheart, but his family is powerful. He hasn't earned any family business yet, so people probably don't look down on him. Feng, who didn't start a family first and then start a career. She said, when he gets married, he will naturally have a family business." Zhou Lejun said, "Mother, this is also a lie to children. When you spend it alone, you can't make a family business, and if you add another person, can you even make a family business with two people? If you don't believe me, ask my father, was he rich before he got married, or was he rich after he got married?" Feng Shi looked at Zhou Lang. Tuesday Lang immediately said, "I am the richest now. That's because all of us have grown up. Not to mention Li Wei and I, even Lai Ruo, we don't need you to support them now. You can still take some money from us every year, can you not make money?" Zhou Lejun remembered this and asked, "Mother, I'm getting married. What about the dowry money you took from me before that you said you wanted to save for me?" Feng. Zhou Lejun had a clear look on his face, and then Feng Shi suddenly felt guilty and didn't dare to mention Zhou Liwei's marriage for some unknown reason. After thinking about it on Tuesday, Lang said, "It's okay, we won't come in the 12th lunar month, and they will definitely go home. It's okay to talk about kissing at that time." Zhou Lejun got married in the 12th lunar month. At that time, Zhou Lejun and the others also came back from the grassland. If they got married in the capital, then Zhou Lejun and his wife would definitely come to the capital. If you can go back to your hometown to get married, that's even better. In fact, not only the couple on Tuesday, but also the old Zhou Tiou and Qian Shi also felt that they should go home when they got married. Although the wedding banquet in the capital was also very lively, but they didn't know each individual very well, so they still went back to the village to organize it. The old Zhutu discussed with Zhou Dalan, when the second girl gets married, let's go back to the village, and then let the big head bring his daughter-in-law with him. We will set up a few more tables of wine, and we still have to tell the villagers about such a big thing as marriage. Zhou Dalan agreed. He also wanted to go home during the Chinese New Year this year, and he felt homesick after being out for more than a year. When Man Bao heard it, he whispered to Bai Shan, "If you can be admitted to the Jinchi this year, will you have family leave?" Bai Shan nodded, glanced at her and asked, "What, do you want to go home?" Man Bao nodded and whispered, "I'll try to take a family leave with the Thai hospital." Bai Shan said, "I'm afraid it won't be easy. It is not easy to invite, she also wants to go home." The next day, the bride recognized her relatives and went to the lobby with Zhou Lishong with a blushing face. The Bai family was also on the list. Lu Sunyang had been instructed before, so they also prepared their marriage ceremony. Man Bao's gift was the same as Zhou Dalan's and Qian's, including a pair of shoes and clothes. Man Bao received a lot of acknowledgement gifts such as shoes, but it was the first time she received clothes for her elders. She was so happy that she put them on and showed off to Bai Shan and Bai Erlang after taking them back. Bai Shan didn't say anything. Bai Erlang was a little jealous. He scratched it and found that, in addition to his son and daughter getting married in the future, his eldest brother's son might get such a marriage ceremony when he got married. Not to mention Bai Shan, he is the only one in his family, and he is the only one in his life who has received such a ceremony from his own son. After the marriage recognition, Lu Sunyang officially joined the big family of the old Zhou family. She didn't need to live in the palace, because she was married and could apply for a residence outside with the imperial physician's office. Then you can go back and forth between the imperial physician's office and your home every day. She is still a medical assistant at the Taiyuan hospital. She has already learned almost all the courses of the Taiyuan hospital. Now it's just that the gentlemen give their 12 students a small lesson. There are only 4 days of courses every 10 days, and only these 4 half of the day, so they are still in the palace most of the time. The advantage of this is that Man Bao knows more about the news outside the palace and the situation at home. When she went to work in the palace again, Lu Sunyang told her, "Fourth uncle and the others are going out early in the morning." Man Bao was slightly surprised and asked, "Didn't I wait for me to rest before leaving? There are 3 days left." Jin Tianjian said that it will rain in a few days, and it seems to be raining for a long time, so the fourth uncle and the others decided to leave early. Man Bao said, "In this case, the medicine I have prepared for them, come to me and get it when you leave the palace next morning." The reason why they had to wait for Man Bao to rest before setting off was because firstly they had to see them off to meet, and secondly, they had to wait for the pills and other things that Man Bao prepared for them. Every time they go out, Man Bao will prepare some pills for them, and will also pack some medicinal materials for them to take with them in case of emergency. And this time, Man Bao also prepared medicated patches for them. Of course, it was not prepared, but boiled the ointment and handed it directly to Lu Sunyang. Li Jun and Li Wei are both smart, go back and teach them how to prepare the medicine. Stick it, if they can't remember, they put the amount on the jar, and it's a useful thing, no worse than the pills we make. Lu Sunyang responded, took a load out of the palace, took it back and handed it over to Zhou Lijun and others. By the time Man Bao left the palace, Shu Yulang and the others had already set off for 3 days, and the family had become accustomed to their departure, that is, Tuol Wang and Feng Shi both accepted it well, and then planned to go home. On Tuesday, Lang said, "The autumn harvest is about to happen at home. It's definitely not good for the old couple at home. Dad, I think I'll go back in 2 days. Moreover, after the winter, the medicinal materials will be collected, and he has to start selling the medicinal materials. Both the raw medicinal materials and the dried medicinal materials have to be processed. Zhou Lang will definitely not be able to do these things, so he still has to go back." Old Zhu Tu also knew this, so he waved his hand and asked Wu Yulang to go back with them. He said, "Find a bigger caravan to follow, it's safe. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2049. Friday Lang packed up his things and said goodbye to the Lu family. Their child is still young, so it is not easy to follow him around, and the reason why he wants to go home is because the herbs he received will be sent to the capital after being dried and processed, so he has to go to Beijing after the winter. It is not a long time and it is unnecessary must bring his wife and children. As soon as the couple left on Friday and Tuesday, the house became even colder, but quietness also had the advantage of being quiet. After Bai Shan and the others rested, they read more and more seriously, and the time was getting longer and longer. In August, Bai Dalan began to write and post poems. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang thought about it. Although they didn't need to post, they also wrote 2 poems and submitted them to Kong Jiju. There is no way, they are reading with the prince now, it is not good for anyone to vote for this poem, just vote for Kong Jiju. Kong Jiju received the poems from the 2 of them from the concierge. He couldn't help drawing his forehead, and then put the poems of the 2 of them in the 3 good poems he had chosen. When drinking and eating with his colleagues, take it out and appreciate it together. Posting is something that every student who wants to take the Jinshi exam has to go through, in order to gain some fame before the exam, so that the examiners will have a certain impression score when they see their names when grading the papers. Of course, if you can meet an official who appreciates you and shares your interests, it will be even better. He will recommend you to other officials. Even if you do not perform well in the exam and are recommended by an official, he will have a better chance of being selected than others. Yes, the imperial examinations of this dynasty are not ambiguous. So the examiner's impression score is very important. It is even more important to have the impression of the emperor. Kong Jiju does not think that Bai Shan and Bai Chen will fall off the list. Although none of them are obvious, they are really valued by the emperor and the prince, and regardless of their character and talent, they have been recognized by the ministers of civil and military affairs in the Manchu dynasty. The other one is also heavy on love and righteousness, and is the future consort of the princess. Even if the ranking is not high, they will not fall off the list. And, do they still need to be famous? But in the end, they were his own students, and the talent of the two was still passable, so Kong Jiju mixed the poems of the two with the ones he liked for everyone to see. As a sacrificial wine of the Imperial Academy, the prince and the grandfather, the daily submissions received by Kong's sacrificial wine are counted in baskets. Every day the concierge moved baskets of posts into his study. Of course he couldn't read them one by one, because many people were afraid that they would not be able to see it when they voted for the Confucius sacrifice wine, and they sent articles to his house almost every day, and the repetition rate was particularly high. He can only let his disciples screen, put aside the ones that have been seen before, put aside those that are obviously unreasonable, put aside those with ugly words, put aside those with dirty roles, and put aside the rest. I will watch it in person, and then choose what I think is good, or really appreciate it, meet people, chat, and then decide whether to recommend it. Because of the imperial examinations, the economy of Beijing, which had been sluggish after the national filial piety, became active again, and it became more lively every day. Many students from other places filled the vast majority of vacancies in the capital, so restaurants, bookstores, and tea houses, restaurants, and even the business of all kinds of small things outside has become more and more prosperous. On Saturday, Lang felt that the business of his own restaurant was better, even though he had already hired a chef and hired 2 more helpers, he was too busy. Little Chien went to help, so the restaurant's business was better. It's not how exquisite the food she cooks, but it's very appetizing, just like the food you eat at home, but it's better than the food she cooks at home. Moreover, Zhuji restaurant has a large amount of food, unlike some restaurants, which are full of flavors and aromas, but only very few, and 1 table and 2 chopsticks can finish eating. Here, 3 or 5 fellow villagers gather together and order 3 or 2 dishes, which is much cheaper than asking the cook to cook by themselves, so the candidates who live nearby like to eat at Zhuji restaurant. Especially the students from Sichuan and Sichuan, they identified Zhuji restaurant. There's no way, it's too good for the taste. The food from other restaurants is fresh at the beginning, but it can't be eaten later. Just in the midst of this lively and tense, time rushes into October, and the Jinchi examination begins. Man Bao followed Mrs. Lu to send the 3 brothers of the Bai family to the entrance of the examination room. Mr. Zhuang had never experienced the imperial examination, so he was a little nervous and could only tell them, "Don't make a typo, write it first, check carefully, the rolls should be clean." This was a warning from all the colleagues in the Changguan Hall who had participated in the imperial examination and had been the examiners. Kong Jiju said bluntly, "The papers are not clean and the handwriting is scribbled. With so many papers, the time is short. How can you identify your characters word by word? The Imperial College has long ago stipulated that all exams must be written in italics, italics. So Mr. Zhuang only told these 3 things at this time. Bai Shan and Bai Dalan and Bai Erlang obeyed obediently, and then carried the test basket into the test room. This is the second time for Mrs. Lu to send her child into the examination room. Not to mention, she is still very nervous, even more nervous than sending her son into the examination room back then. So she supported Zheng's and Man Bao's hands and said, "Let's sit and wait in the tea house next door." Her hands and feet are a little weak now, and she doesn't want to take the car home for the time being. Mr. Zhuang thought that they would also come to pick him up in the evening, so he nodded in agreement. So the group went to a tea house not far away to sit and drink tea and wait. Man Bao poured tea for the elders and asked Mr. Zhuang, "How many people will be admitted to the Jinshi division this year?" Mr. Zhuang said, "The meaning of listening to Confucius' sacrifice is that we only intend to take 32 people." Man Bao was surprised, "So few?" Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, "It's not too small, only 27 people were taken last time." Man Bao couldn't help but feel a little worried. Can senior brother bypass the exam? Mr. Zhuang said indifferently, "I can't pass the test this year, and the next time I take the test, he is still young, so don't be in a hurry." Mr. Zhuang paused and said, "It's Bai Shan and Bai Chang. If they pass the exam, they shouldn't be employed at this time. They should go out to study for a while." Man Bao nodded, and looked at Mr. Zhuang. The teacher and the apprentice were happy. Mrs. Lu only glanced at the two of them. Years ago, they were attacking and wanting to go on a study tour in the next 2 years, but she has not yet made up her mind whether to let them go or not. After all, it is not so safe outside. But it is not always a good thing to keep children in the capital. Eagles are soaring in the sky, how can they stay in their nests to avoid the wind and rain? Mrs. Liu's heart is like being roasted by fire. She wants them to stay in the capital in a stable and healthy way, but she doesn't want to restrain their wings, so she has always avoided participating in this topic. But the Jinshi exam is over for 3 days, and then the rankings are released. At that time, she will always have to face this problem. On the first day of the Jinshi exam, the exams were poetry and essays. Bai Shan and the 3 of them had no problems, and they came out happily in the evening. But it became difficult from the second day. The exam was in the study of classics. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2050. When he got the answer, Bai Erlang was stunned. "Although I came here to gain knowledge, it's too bad." Bai Shan frowned and said, "This year's questions are too difficult." He has done the Jinshi subjects 5 times before, and none of the problems he has given are so difficult or so biased. Bai Dalan also found it difficult. The 2 cousins looked at each other and felt that this time I was afraid it was really an experience. Because of this idea, Bai Shan and the others were completely relaxed when they entered the examination room on the last day. Even Bai Dalan, who had always cared about the examination, waved to them with a relaxed expression, "See you in the afternoon. See you in the afternoon." The tables of the 3 were far apart, and I don't know how they were divided. Anyway, they were not in the same place. Bai Shan's was in the second row, very close to the position of the examiner in front. Today's exam is about current affairs, and as soon as the papers are handed out, Bai Shan has only 2 words in his heart, "Sure enough." He stared blankly at the title on the scroll, and after a while, he raised his hand and poured a little water into the inkstone, then took the grinding rod to polish the ink. Grinding his hand slowly and slowly, his mind turned quickly. He felt that he should have no hope for this exam. Not only him, but also the big brother and Bai Er. No matter how famous he is, Bai Er is still the future concubine of the princess, and the examiner can't ignore the content of the paper and give them high marks. But since it's here, the paper still has to be done well. Do it as if it were the homework assigned by Mr. Bai Shan pondered, how to start. The candidates in the same examination room also collapsed. Some people have already begun to wander the sky, not to mention writing essays. Although Bai Shan didn't feel that his ideas were mature or that his ideas could be recognized, He still wrote 2 large pieces of paper. Bai Dalan and Bai Erlang also filled a piece of paper after being sluggish. You especially remember that when they first started to write policy theories, they would not start, and Mr. Zhuang taught them that whether or not they would start the thesis, you must first understand the topic, and then have your own ideas. After you can think, you will write. Even if you can't start, the dictionaries and literary style are average, but as long as you write down what you have thought about, you can count some points. Sir, you will not think that you have no ink in your stomach. The 3 of them have always kept this in mind, so even if they feel guilty, they have written a lot, biting their pens to the left and right and worrying about it. In the eyes of the candidates who had to hold back for a long time before they could produce 2 lines of words, these people are very powerful. But these are all appearances. The 3 of them were stunned until the afternoon. After eating lunch, they carefully revised and added them. After confirming that there was no increase, they began to copy the contents of the manuscript onto the paper, and finally packed their things in frustration and went out walk. The gong sounded, and everyone handed in the papers and went out. When they arrived at the gate, Feng Zonping and a few others also walked over. Everyone looked at each other, and finally determined that everyone seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Feng Zonping said, "My father said, I will take the test again next year. If I still fail the test, I will go to the Mingjing test. Do you want to join us?" Bai Shan refused. "I'm going to study abroad first, and come back in 2 years to take the test again. If I don't pass, I'll think about whether to take the Jinshi or Mingjing." Feng Zonping looked at his face, nodded and said, "Yes, you are still young. Even if you study the Mingjing again in 3 or 4 years, you will still be young. He can't do it anymore. After a few more years of Jinshi exams, he will go to the Mingjing. Even if he is admitted to the Mingjing, he will be considered old." Yi Xiang also sighed, "I knew that Jinshi was difficult to pass, but I didn't know it was so difficult." Bai Dalan nodded in agreement. It was really too difficult. The few of them were not too young, after all, they were still young, and there were village tributes from all over the world. I don't know who cried out first, so everyone couldn't hold back and started crying at the entrance of the examination room. When Man Bao ran to pick them up, he saw many people standing, squatting, or sitting beside them crying, ranging from gray-bearded 50-60-year-old grandfathers to young people in their 30s. She didn't know what happened, so she couldn't help looking at Bai Shan. Seeing that Bai Shan also had a worried look on his face, his eyes seemed to be a little red. Man Bao immediately ran forward and asked, "What's wrong?" Bai Shan sighed, "This year's questions are too difficult." Man Bao, "So it's hard to cry?" The family members of some candidates stepped forward to pick them up and comforted them. "It's all right, I didn't pass the exam this year, and I will take the exam next year. I didn't pass the test this year, and I won't pass the test next year." A gray-bearded candidate wiped his tears and said, "Forget it, I'm not going to take the test. I'll go home and teach my grandson." "Father, why don't you take the Mingjing exam? Your eldest grandson will take the Mingjing exam next year." "I'm in my 50s, and it's too embarrassing to go to the Mingjing." Bai Ji and Feng Zonping, who are planning to change the Mingjing scriptures. Everyone quickly turned around and left, deciding to leave here first. Most of the people who cried were the village tributes. To qualify for the exam, they had to pass the exam in the county seat, then the exam in the prefecture, and finally they had to go to the capital to take the review exam of the Ministry of Officials before they got the exam. Therefore, the age of Xianggong is generally not young, at least 20. Unlike these students, they are still very young because they are students in Fuxiu, Huazijian, and Chongguan Museum. To get the qualification for the examination, they only need to pass the examination first in the school. The Chongguan Hall has a lot of places for students, and Zhao Liaolang and his group have no idea of taking the exam at all, so Bai Shan and the others didn't even take the exam. Those who want to take the Jinchi exam directly report their names, and Kong Jiju will give them the quota. They are. As for Bai Dalan, he had taken the exam once in the Imperial Academy. At that time, he felt that he was still very good, so he was full of confidence. After all, the entrance examination for students in the Imperial College is equivalent to the pre-examination for the Jinchi examination, and his ranking is not low, so he should be very hopeful. But as soon as the papers on classics and current affairs were released, he knew that he had thought too much before. However, even if they don't do well in the exam, they can't lose their momentum, so when a classmate from Kuazijian came up to ask them how they did in the exam, including Bai Shan and Bai Erlang, all three said that they did well in the exam, anyway they are writing a lot. As for whether the examiners will give points or not, that is not necessarily the case. After sending off these unfamiliar classmates, Feng Zonping turned his head and asked Bai Shan and the others, "You really did well in the exam?" Bai Shan said, "Do you believe it? We have the same class." Feng Zonping breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I thought Mr. Zhuang and Kong Jiju had opened a small kitchen for you. This time, the current affairs policy is asking about Junchan's policy. I wonder if he will ask about the important military town next year. Who came up with this topic? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2051. Man Bao said, "I know this." The prince and Confucius came out with the wine. Feng Zonping was taken aback and asked, "How do you know?" Just now, the prince and Kong Jiju came to inspect the examination room. We sat in the tea house outside and met what the prince said. At that time, half of the test was already taken, and it was useless to know who came up with the questions. Everyone didn't expect the prince to ask such a question. It's too difficult. After a day of high-speed brain operation, everyone was tired, so everyone went home after gossiping for a while. Mrs. Lu and Mr. Zhuang were already waiting for them in the carriage. After Bai Shan and his grandmother and mother saluted, they ran to sit with Mr. Zhuang with Man Bao and the others. Seeing how lively they were, Mrs. Lu knew that most of them failed the exam, and she had already thought about it, so she shook her head and smiled and went with them. Bai Shan and the others approached Mr. Zhuang to discuss the subject of the Jinchi this time. Mr. Zhuang did not expect that the topic of their current affairs policy this time would be so difficult. He thought about it and then said, "I seem to have heard from Zhan Shifu and the Crown Prince that in some places, the policy of equalizing fields will not go ahead." The four were puzzled. Why? Mr. Zhuang thought for a while and said, "There are more people, less land, and more adult males are born every year. In some places, the full amount of Yanjai Tian and Kaofen Tian could not be afforded a long time ago." Bai Dalan frowned. "Then you want to replace Junchan's strategy?" Mr. Zhuang asked, "What did you write?" Bai Dalan, "I think the strategy of equalizing the fields is good, but it is not good to restrict the trading of Yanjiashan. I think the trading of Yanjiashan should be opened up. Some people continue to use the money to do what, or want to relocate. But because Yanjiashan can't be bought and sold, it's tied up a lot. Bai Shandao, my eldest brother and I think exactly the opposite. Others may be changeable, but constraints on Yanjiashan's business are the most unchangeable." He said, "Looking at the changes of dynasties in the past, there have been civil riots, and there are inherent reasons for instigating discord, but the people who rioted were landless refugees. Why did they become refugees? Except for natural disasters, they lost their land. Once the Yanjai field can be bought and sold, more people will lose their land in the future. Those who lose their land will have no livelihood, and the world will be in chaos." Bai Dalan smiled and said, "You are alarmist. The purpose of opening the Yanjai Tian business is to facilitate some people and allow them to move more freely and choose their livelihood. They have hands and feet and will judge the consequences of selling the land themselves." Bai Shan said, "There are so many stupid people in the world, and there are more greedy people. I'm afraid they can't judge the consequences of selling the land, so this hole can't be opened. Bai Erlang and Man Bao also think so. Seeing that he was besieged by 3 people, Bai Ji couldn't help but stunned. The 3 of you are unified, so the 2 of you wrote the same thing. Bai Shandao, I still wrote about the strategy of equalizing the fields, but I also guessed the reason for the title. I guess that some people don't like the strategy of equalizing the fields, and there are not enough fields now, so I wrote some changes. And it is emphasized that Yanjiashan cannot be sold. Bai Erlang blushed and said, I just wrote down what I know about Junshan's heist and expressed some opinions. Mr. Zhuang was also interested and asked, what opinion did you write? I think Junshan's policy is very good, better than previous policies. For masters and apprentices. Mr. Zhuang just reached out and touched his head, then said, while the memory is still fresh, silence your article when you go back. The 3 replied in a low voice. After returning, I washed and ate, and then went into the study to write silently. Man Bao followed behind Mr. Zhuang's ass and read the article they wrote silently. Mr. Zhuang read it faster than her, handed it to her, and asked, what do you think? Man Bao said, Bai Shan writes the best, and senior brother Bai has something to say, second. Bai Dalan and Bai Erlang looked up at her together. Man Bao then handed out Bai Shan's share and said, I'm not showing favoritism, it's real. Bai Dalan reached out and took a look, only to find that Bai Shan also wrote about the tax pros and cons related to the Junshan strategy. Bai Dalan is a little remorseful, why didn't he think of this? Bai Dalan frowned and thought about it and asked, Cousin Shan, I remember that you ranked 18th on the general list, right? Bai Shan nodded, not bad. Bai Dalan looked at Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang stroked his beard and pondered, maybe you can really pass the test this time. Bai Shan was surprised, no way, I didn't have a good start and my thesis. The topic this time is too difficult. The reason why he can write so much is because he has read some books from Manbao that mention the pros and cons of the land equalization system. I didn't go into details at all. Everything he knew and felt was superficial, so he had no confidence. You must know that in the past, when writing the current affairs policy arranged by the gentlemen, they took at least 5 days to prepare an article, and it took another 2 or 3 days to write it out. Not only do you have to check the classics, but sometimes you have to go to the 6th department to ask for relevant data. No one thought that the question this time would be so difficult, and none of them had a detailed understanding of the current Junshan strategy. The Junshan strategy they saw in their lives, is still pretty good. At least every year in the autumn after the village, the division of fields for the adult males is very lively, just as happy as the Chinese New Year. Therefore, in terms of the pros and cons of the equal field strategy, the 3 brothers all agreed on it. But the reason why the prince asked this question was because he wanted to ask for a policy. The prince was not very satisfied with the answers of the 3, but Bai Shan's papers were indeed stronger than those of Bai Dalan and Bai Erlang. The prince took out Bai Shan's paper and carefully read it and put it aside, frowning. The examiners knew that the prince was not very satisfied, but several people showed the prince a few papers that they had just seen. After the prince turned over, his brows became even tighter, is there not a single person of insight? Kong Jiju took a few pictures from the side to show him, and said, these are still pretty good. The prince frowned slightly after seeing it, but he was still not very satisfied. Kong Jiju said, His Royal Highness, these are still students. They have no experience in officialdom. It is very good to have this understanding. We can't ask them for the Chinese martial arts. The prince was looking down at a paper, and when he heard the words, he threw the paper in his hand in front of him, and snorted coldly, it is precisely because they are still students, they should be ambitious and energetic. It's all gone. There is no shortage of officials in the DPRK. What I just want to know is whether there are still pearls left in the world. Kong Jiju was very satisfied with the prince's current state of seeking talents, but he was not satisfied with his attitude towards courtiers, but he did not persuade him in front of everyone, but planned to mention it privately after going out for a while. So he changed the subject and said, "His Royal Highness, the results of poetry and classics have come out. When the results of Shiwus come out, they can be sorted. See you tomorrow."